Ex-husband's shocking actions leave ex-wife speechless. What is he hiding from her this time? Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main characters. Ethan, a man in his mid-30s, was always the mysterious type. He had that look, the one that made you feel like there was more to him than meets the eye. Dark brown hair, sharp blue eyes, and a body that showed he'd spent his fair share of time at the gym. But it wasn't just his looks that drew people in, it was his aura. A man who kept to himself, never revealing too much. And then there was Olivia. She wasn't the kind of person to be easily impressed. She had her own charm, a quiet strength about her that made her unforgettable. With long, flowing blonde hair and a smile that could light up any room, she was the kind of woman you noticed. But her past with Ethan wasn't as simple as it seemed. They'd been married for 5 years. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was full of ups and downs, but in the end, they had decided to part ways. The love had faded, replaced by bitterness and resentment. But there was always a lingering question in Olivia's mind: did she ever really know Ethan? Why had their marriage ended so suddenly? That question haunted her. Little did she know, today would be the day that question would finally be answered in a way she never saw coming. It all started when Ethan reached out. He hadn't spoken to Olivia in months. Not a single text, not a single call. So when her phone buzzed with his name on the screen, her heart skipped a beat. What did he want? Why was he contacting her after all this time? Curiosity mixed with caution. She picked up the phone. Olivia, we need to talk. It's important. Ethan's voice came through, sounding urgent but calm, like he was trying to keep his emotions in check. She hesitated. The last time they had talked, it hadn't ended well. In fact, it had been a messy and painful goodbye. But there was something in his tone, something she couldn't ignore. What's this about Ethan? She asked, her voice steady but her mind racing. Ethan's reply was short, almost cryptic. I'm at the old place. Come over. We need to clear the air. Olivia could feel the tension building, but there was no turning back now. She grabbed her keys and headed to the apartment they once shared, wondering what Ethan had to say. What was he hiding? Why had he suddenly reached out after all this time? Olivia's heart raced as she made her way to the place that had once been her home. The questions filled her mind, each one more pressing than the last. She had to know what Ethan was hiding. She had to understand why her ex-husband's actions were so shocking. As Olivia walked towards the building, her mind was racing. She hadn't been back here in over a year, since the day she packed up her things and moved out. The memories of the old place, the fights, the heartbreak, were all too fresh. She couldn't help but wonder why Ethan had chosen to meet her here of all places. Hadn't he moved on? Hadn't she? As she reached the door, she hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and pushed it open. The familiar smell of the place hit her instantly. It was like nothing had changed. She stepped inside, her footsteps echoing through the empty hallway. It was quiet. Too quiet. Ethan's voice suddenly broke the silence. Olivia, I'm in here, he called from the living room. She followed his voice, her heart pounding in her chest. When she entered the room, she found Ethan sitting on the couch, his expression serious. He stood up as she walked in, his eyes locking onto hers. I'm glad you came, he said, his voice low. Olivia didn't respond at first. She just stood there, taking him in. Ethan looked different, but not in a way she could immediately place. His hair was a bit longer than she remembered, and there was a certain weight in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. Something was off. What's going on, Ethan? Olivia asked, her voice steady but tinged with concern. Ethan motioned for her to sit down, and she reluctantly did. I didn't want to do this over the phone, he began, looking down for a moment before meeting her gaze again. I know it's been a long time, but I need you to understand something. I never stopped caring about you. Olivia's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected that. She wasn't sure what she expected, but it certainly wasn't that. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan took a deep breath, running his hand through his hair. There's something I've been hiding from you, he said, his words hanging in the air. Olivia's stomach twisted. What could he possibly be hiding? She had thought they'd closed that chapter of their lives, that everything was behind them. But now, here he was, saying that he had been hiding something from her. She had to know. What is it, Ethan? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and something else she couldn't quite read. I can't tell you everything yet, he said quietly. But I need you to trust me, Olivia. I didn't want you to find out like this, but I don't know how much longer I can keep it from you. Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. She had no idea what Ethan was talking about, but she knew one thing for sure: this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As Olivia sat there, the weight of Ethan's words hung in the air. She had so many questions, but there was a part of her that didn't want to know the answers. The tension in the room was palpable, and she could feel her heart racing in her chest. She had always believed that once they were divorced, that was the end of it. She had closed that chapter, moved on with her life, and left the past behind her. But now, with Ethan sitting in front of her, looking like a man with a burden he couldn't carry alone, she wasn't so sure. Ethan's eyes were filled with guilt and something else, something darker. It was almost as if he was trying to protect her from whatever it was he was hiding. Olivia's mind raced with possibilities. Was it about their past together? Had he been hiding something about their relationship all along? Or was it something more recent, something she couldn't even begin to imagine? Ethan, please. You're scaring me, Olivia said, her voice trembling slightly as she tried to keep her composure. Ethan ran his hand through his hair again, his gaze avoiding hers for a moment. I never wanted it to get to this point, he said quietly. But I've been dealing with something I should have told you about a long time ago. Olivia leaned forward, her curiosity now overpowering her fear. What is it, Ethan? What have you been keeping from me? Ethan's eyes met hers, and for the first time since they sat down, he seemed to truly see her again. It's about something I've been involved in, he began, his voice low. Something that's been going on behind the scenes, something that could affect both of us. Olivia's stomach churned. What do you mean? What could possibly involve both of us? She asked, her mind struggling to keep up. Ethan took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. I've been trying to protect you, Olivia. From something that happened a long time ago. And now, it's all coming to a head. Olivia's pulse quickened. This was it. The moment she had been waiting for, the moment she would finally get answers. What happened, Ethan? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's eyes darkened, and he looked down at his hands as if he were gathering the strength to speak. I made a deal, he said quietly. A deal with people who weren't exactly on the right side of things. And now, they're looking for me. And they're looking for you too. Olivia felt as though the room had suddenly grown cold. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. What kind of deal had Ethan made? And why was she involved? Her mind spun with questions, but the answers felt just out of reach. Ethan, I don't understand. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice shaking. Ethan's face hardened. I should have told you sooner. But I didn't want to drag you into it. I didn't want to hurt you. Olivia's head was spinning. This was too much to process, too much to comprehend in one moment. But one thing was clear, Ethan was hiding something, and it was bigger than anything she had imagined. Olivia sat back in the chair, trying to process what Ethan had just told her. His words echoed in her mind, but she couldn't make sense of them. A deal? With people who were not on the right side of things. And now they were looking for both of them? Her heart raced as she tried to hold herself together. "What do you mean, they're looking for me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Ethan's face was hard, his jaw set. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. "I don't know how else to explain it, Olivia," he said, his voice low and strained. "I got involved in something I shouldn't have. And now, the people who are involved in it, they won't stop until they get what they want." Olivia shook her head, unable to grasp the magnitude of what he was saying. She had never imagined that Ethan, the man she had once loved, could be involved in something like this. "What kind of deal, Ethan? What could you have gotten involved in that would put both of us in danger?" she asked, her voice rising slightly with the frustration building inside her. Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with regret. "It's not that simple," he said. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I just thought I was doing the right thing at the time. But now, I realize how wrong I was." Olivia felt a cold chill run down her spine. She had always trusted Ethan, even when things had gotten tough in their marriage. But this was something else entirely. "What's going to happen now?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ethan let out a long breath. "I don't know, Olivia. I don't know how much longer I can keep running from this. And I don't want you to get dragged into it." Olivia could see the fear in his eyes. This wasn't just about a deal gone wrong. This was something much bigger than that. "You should have told me sooner," she said, her voice hard now. "You should have told me before things got this far." Ethan nodded slowly, guilt and pain evident in his eyes. "I know. I should have. But I didn't want you to be a part of this. I didn't want you to get hurt. I thought I could handle it on my own." Olivia stood up abruptly, her emotions flooding her all at once. "You've already dragged me into it, Ethan. I'm already involved." She paced back and forth, trying to calm herself, but the anger and fear were overwhelming. "So what now? What do we do?" she asked, looking back at him. Ethan stood up too, his face filled with determination. "Now we figure this out. We have to face whatever's coming together. I can't keep running, and I can't protect you from this forever. But I'll do everything I can to make sure you're safe." Olivia looked at him, her heart still racing. The man standing in front of her wasn't the man she had once known. This was someone else, someone desperate, someone caught up in something she couldn't even begin to understand. She didn't know what was coming next, but one thing was clear, she couldn't back down now. Whatever Ethan was hiding, they would have to face it together. Olivia felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her as she stood there, staring at Ethan. His words had left her shaken, but there was no turning back now. She had to know everything, even if it meant confronting a part of Ethan's life that he had kept hidden from her for so long. They were in this together now, whether she was ready or not. "Ethan, I need you to tell me everything," she said, her voice firm despite the fear gnawing at her. "You can't keep holding things back. Not anymore." Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of regret and something else, something she couldn't quite read. He took a deep breath, like he was preparing himself for something difficult, something he wasn't sure he was ready to say. "All right," he said quietly. "But you have to promise me that you'll stay calm and listen until I finish. It's a lot, Olivia. I don't know how you'll take it." Olivia nodded. "I can handle it. Just tell me the truth." Ethan hesitated for a moment, then began. "It started a few years ago. I got involved with a group of people who were not exactly legal. At first, it was just a way to make some money. I wasn't thinking about the consequences. I just needed something to get me out of a rough patch. But then, things escalated." Olivia's heart sank as she listened. She had always known Ethan was a little reckless, but this was beyond what she could have imagined. "What kind of people, Ethan?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's gaze shifted, and he looked at the ground for a moment before answering. "They're not the kind of people you want to be associated with. I knew that going in, but I thought I could control it. I thought I could get out whenever I wanted. But I was wrong." He paused, and Olivia could see the weight of his words settling on him. I made some deals. Illegal ones. I thought I was just doing what I had to do to survive. But now, those deals are coming back to haunt me. They're coming after me, Olivia. And they're coming after you, too. Olivia's stomach twisted. This was more than she could handle. She had never imagined that her life, her safety, would be put at risk because of Ethan's decisions. Why didn't you tell me sooner? She asked, her voice breaking slightly. I could have helped you. I could have done something. Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with pain. I didn't want to drag you into this. I thought I could handle it on my own. But now, it's too late. I can't protect you anymore. I've made things worse by keeping you in the dark. Olivia stood there, processing everything he had just said. The reality of it all was sinking in, and she couldn't deny that she was scared. She had always believed that their past was behind them, that they had moved on. But now, it felt like everything was falling apart again. So what now? She asked, her voice trembling. What are we supposed to do? Ethan took a step closer, his face serious. Now we figure this out together. We can't run from it anymore. We face it head on, and we find a way to make it right. Olivia nodded slowly, still trying to wrap her mind around everything. She didn't know if she could trust him completely, not after all that had happened. But she also knew that she couldn't walk away now. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. As the days passed, Olivia found herself constantly replaying the conversation she had had with Ethan. Every word, every detail, seemed to echo in her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was looming over them, something she couldn't control. She had agreed to face whatever was coming together with Ethan, but deep down, she had no idea what that really meant. Ethan was acting different, more distant at times, as if he was carrying a weight too heavy for one person to bear. He had made mistakes, and now he was dragging her into a situation she never asked for. But Olivia wasn't the kind of person to back down. If she was going to face this, she would do it head on. She couldn't let Ethan fight this battle alone, even if she didn't fully understand what he had gotten them into. The next morning, as she sat in her apartment, she received a message from Ethan. It was short and to the point. Meet me at the usual place. We need to talk. Olivia hesitated for a moment, but she knew there was no avoiding it. She grabbed her keys and headed out the door. When she arrived at the place, Ethan was already there, sitting at a table in the back corner. He looked up when he saw her, his expression tense. Olivia, I'm sorry for dragging you into this, he said, his voice filled with regret. I never wanted this to happen. Olivia sat down across from him, her eyes narrowing. What's going on, Ethan? You said we would face this together, but you've been keeping things from me. What aren't you telling me? Ethan sighed, running his hand through his hair. There's something I need to show you, he said quietly. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope, sliding it across the table toward her. What's this? Olivia asked, her curiosity piqued as she took the envelope. She opened it carefully, revealing a single photograph. It was an image of Ethan, but it wasn't just any photograph. It was taken in a place she recognized, an old warehouse on the outskirts of town. In the picture, Ethan was standing with a group of men she didn't recognize. They were all smiling, but there was something unsettling about the image. Who are these people, Ethan? Olivia asked, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan looked at her, his face drawn. Those are the people I got involved with. The ones I made the deal with. He explained. They're not just anyone. They're dangerous, and now they know who you are. They're looking for you, Olivia. The weight of his words hit Olivia like a ton of bricks. She had known this situation was serious, but she hadn't realized just how far things had gone. She looked at the photograph again, her mind racing. What are we going to do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's face hardened. We have to make sure they don't find you. I don't know how much longer I can protect you, but I'll do whatever it takes. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest. She had no idea what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain: she wasn't walking away from this. Not now. Not after everything they had been through. She would stand by Ethan, no matter what came next. As the days passed, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that danger was creeping closer. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart skipped a beat, wondering if it was a message from Ethan, telling her that the worst had happened. But she hadn't heard from him in hours, and the silence was starting to wear on her. Was he okay? Was he truly keeping her safe, or was this all spiraling out of control? The photograph Ethan had shown her haunted her thoughts. Those men in the warehouse, people she didn't recognize, but whose eyes seemed to stare right through her in that photo. They were dangerous, and they knew who she was. That was the part that terrified her the most. She had never imagined her life could be so entangled with his past, with the consequences of the choices Ethan had made. It felt like everything had been building to this point, and now there was no turning back. As she sat in her apartment, trying to focus on anything other than the growing sense of dread in her chest, there was a knock at the door. Her heart raced as she stood up, unsure of who it could be. She glanced through the peephole and saw Ethan standing outside, looking anxious. Without hesitation, she opened the door. "Ethan, what's going on?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. Ethan stepped inside quickly, his eyes scanning the room as if checking for any signs of danger. "We need to move, Olivia," he said, his voice low and urgent. "They're getting closer. I've been trying to keep them off our trail, but it's not going to work for much longer." Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. "Who, Ethan? Who's after us?" she demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan took a deep breath, his face grim. "Those men I showed you in the photo, those people I got involved with, they're part of something bigger. Something dangerous. And they're coming for us, Olivia." She swallowed hard, trying to process what he was saying. "What do we do? Where do we go?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ethan stepped closer to her, his eyes meeting hers with a look of determination. "We need to get out of town. It's the only way we'll stay ahead of them. We can't stay here, not anymore." Olivia nodded, the fear and uncertainty swirling inside her. She had no choice but to trust Ethan now. He had brought her into this world, and now they had to face it together. "Okay," she said softly, her voice steady despite the fear. "I'll pack a bag. We'll leave tonight." Ethan nodded and turned to leave, but then he stopped and looked back at her. "Olivia, I know I've put you in an impossible situation. I never wanted any of this to happen. But we can get through it. I promise." Olivia felt a lump in her throat as she watched him leave. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing: whatever came next, they would face it together. She wasn't walking away. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. As she gathered her things and prepared to leave, she couldn't help but wonder just how far this situation would go. How much longer could they keep running? But for now, all she could do was follow Ethan's lead and pray that they could stay one step ahead of the danger that was closing in on them. As night fell, Olivia and Ethan packed the last of their things, each movement slow and deliberate. The weight of the decision they had made hung heavily in the air. They weren't just leaving their apartment, they were leaving behind everything familiar. Everything safe. Olivia couldn't help but feel a sense of dread as she shoved a few last items into her bag. Where would they go? How long would they be on the run? And what exactly were they running from? Ethan had said they needed to leave town, but Olivia had no idea where they could go that would be far enough to escape the people after them. She had trusted him so far, but the uncertainty ahead felt almost unbearable. As she zipped up her bag and glanced at Ethan, she saw the same worry in his eyes. He was trying to stay strong, but she could tell he was just as scared as she was. "Are you sure about this, Ethan?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan nodded without hesitation. "We don't have a choice. We have to keep moving." Olivia took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She wasn't sure what she was afraid of more, the unknown dangers ahead, or the possibility of losing Ethan. He had pulled her into this mess, but he was the only person she could rely on now. She needed him, and he needed her. Together, they had to figure out how to survive. They left the apartment quietly, making sure not to draw attention to themselves. The streets outside were empty, the city quiet except for the occasional car passing by. They walked swiftly, their steps echoing on the pavement. Olivia felt the weight of every glance they exchanged, as if both of them were silently acknowledging the enormity of what they were about to face. They made their way to Ethan's car, a nondescript sedan that blended in with the rest of the vehicles on the street. It wasn't flashy, but it was reliable, just like Ethan had always been. She got into the passenger seat, her hands shaking slightly as she fastened her seatbelt. Ethan started the car, and they pulled away from the curb. The city lights faded in the rearview mirror as they drove farther and farther from the place they had once called home. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they were no longer running away from their past. They were running towards something they didn't fully understand, but something that could mean the difference between survival and disaster. Olivia glanced over at Ethan as he focused on the road ahead. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice filled with both fear and curiosity. Ethan's eyes flickered to her for a brief moment before returning to the road. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "But we'll figure it out. One step at a time." The silence that followed was thick, but it wasn't uncomfortable. They had come to a mutual understanding that there was no turning back. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. There was a small part of Olivia that wanted to believe it was still possible to go back to the way things were. But she knew deep down that wasn't possible. They couldn't go back to the past. The only thing they could do was move forward. And as they drove into the night, Olivia realized that moving forward with Ethan, no matter what came next, was the only choice she could make. The road stretched out before them, empty and silent, as Ethan drove through the night. Olivia stared out the window, watching the world blur past, her mind racing with questions she couldn't seem to answer. Where were they going? How long would they be on the run? And most importantly, would they ever find a place where they could finally feel safe? She had always imagined her life would follow a more predictable path. Maybe she would have a career, maybe even a family, a home where she could put down roots. But now, everything had changed. They were no longer running from their past, but towards an uncertain future. Ethan glanced over at her, noticing the unease on her face. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer than before. Olivia turned to look at him, his eyes full of concern. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice quiet. "It feels like we're just running in circles. I don't know where this is leading, Ethan." He sighed, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. "I know. I wish I had better answers for you. But right now, the only thing we can do is keep moving. One step at a time." Olivia nodded, though her heart was heavy. She trusted Ethan, she had to, because he was the only person she had left, but she didn't know how much longer they could keep this up. Every time they stopped, she felt like they were closer to being found. The thought of those men, the ones Ethan had gotten involved with, still sent a chill down her spine. She didn't know what they were capable of, but she knew it wasn't good. "Do you think they'll find us?" she asked after a moment, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's face tightened as he looked ahead. "I'm doing everything I can to keep you safe," he said, his voice steady but filled with a quiet determination. "But I can't promise that we're untouchable. They're dangerous, Olivia. But I won't stop protecting you." Olivia's heart ached at the sincerity in his words. She had always known Ethan could be reckless, but she had never doubted his loyalty. Now, as they drove deeper into the unknown, she realized just how far he was willing to go for her. It was more than just love, it was survival. They drove for what felt like hours, the night swallowing them whole. Olivia glanced at the clock on the dashboard, 2:45 a.m. They hadn't stopped since leaving the city, and she was starting to feel the exhaustion creep in. "We need to rest," she said, her voice soft but firm. Ethan didn't argue. He pulled off the main road and into a small, rundown motel parking lot. We'll stay here for the night, he said, turning off the engine. They both got out of the car, and Olivia took a deep breath of the cool night air. The motel looked like it hadn't been updated in years, but it was far enough from the city to feel somewhat safe. As they checked in, the clerk didn't ask any questions, just handed them a key. Ethan glanced around, his instincts still on high alert, but the place seemed quiet. They made their way to the room, the door creaking as Ethan opened it. Inside, the room was simple: 2 beds, a small TV, and a faded carpet. It wasn't much, but it was a place to rest. We'll figure this out, Ethan said, his voice low as he set his bag down on one of the beds. We'll find a way out of this. I promise. Olivia sat down on the bed, staring at him. I hope so, she whispered. But as she looked into his eyes, she realized that no matter what happened next, they were in this together. And together, they would face whatever came next. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Olivia felt like maybe, just maybe, they had a chance.